I'll call the meet, because Joseph just reminded me, and I knew this going in, that clock is not right. So,
All right.
so, and since everybody's here who's coming, I think we may as well start. I will call the meeting to order. I need a motion to approve the agenda or a reason not to.
I move to approve it.
Second for, okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay. There's no public back there. So the first item is to revisit the naming and recognition policy that we tackled last month and left with some questions. Sounds like the question was whether we could go into closed session, and apparently not. So are there other, that's what I remember being the main thing.
When I talked to legal about it, they sort of reiterated. There is the named committee could be a non-public meeting. So there could be conversation at that level, there would be board members there, but it would not be grounds for having a closed meeting of the board.
Okay. So are we ready to approve or not approve this policy? Or is there more discussion? No? Okay, in that case, I need a motion to approve the policy as amended by the committee.
So moved. Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Next on the agenda is the NOBU budget requests. And I would just before we start, Joseph and John, do you have questions about what NOBU is before we discuss it? No, okay.
The trickiest part of putting it together, well, one aspect is we don't know what the state monies will look like. We don't have confirmation of that yet. That doesn't come out until later in the year. So we base that estimate off of the previous year. They are trending down. I did not try to work out an equation of how much lower it's probably going to go. But because the NOBU budget essentially can roll over, if it was if the money came in a little bit lower than we expected, there would be built-in accommodation for that, or we could underspend the project to make room for it. So that's sort of the most unknown piece. The Friends Foundation annual gift, we know what that will be, but we just used the previous year's number for the state money.
Looking down the road for next year, are we thinking that the changes to the state library are gonna impact this, like enrich Iowa in particular? I wasn't sure if, I thought maybe the Access Iowa was, I'm iffy on which one's which, but one of them was gonna be very likely affected and the other one was possibly going to be affected. I mean, do you see anything happening like that?
I think all parts of it could be affected, including ILL. Because as there get to be different restrictions on what kind of collection can have what material. I would say I'm relatively confident for this budget cycle that all of the agreements will be fulfilled. But going forward, I don't know. I think I think there's a real risk that will be reduced.
Especially since we don't see this until after we, until you don't see the money until after you have somewhat allotted it. It's kind of extra tricky. You kind of have to future forecast. Use your magic 8-ball to kind of figure out
And
what the state might help you with.
if there was articulated planned reductions in that, we could sort of build that into the language of the NODIPU request. And even if we didn't have the numbers yet, we could sort of say these are the priority projects. These are the projects that would be the state funding would be spent on. We think about the state money contribution just a little bit differently because most of that does need to be spent in the year that's given, where the annual gift from the Friends Foundation doesn't have that stipulation. So they are sort of approached timeline wise a little bit differently, but I think it feels really unknown to me what the future of that's going to be.
Right.
And as a larger library in the state, we have more revenue, more money coming from that than a lot of other libraries do.
But I'm assuming you also have you do more ILLs than other places and you are more of a participator on your end.
Yes.
I know these sorts of things are sort of demand vagueness, but the evaluation assessment tools on the second page, that it was so vague, I had no idea. It's not a lot. It's $2,000, but I have no idea what that money is going to be used for.
Well, in all fairness, John, I also wrote something specific next to that, and that's like the only thing I wrote on the packet. almost, so.
It's a great question, and you're right, there isn't some intentional vagueness. That, I'm imagining that we would first look into some technology tools that will give us deeper information about like click-through rates of social media, newsletters, things like that. We're really trying to hone in on what are the most effective ways to share the library story. And it's not just, did you open the newsletter, but did you spend more than 1 second? Did you go through a link? And unfortunately, a lot of that's not built into the tools that we already use or at an additional cost. And then to apply some of the same thinking to social media, that's also a possibility. There's a distinct possibility that $2,000 will not cover many of those tools. And we also could do some general staff training around evaluation of other service. But I was imagining tech tools. I can make that a little more.
And just for, if there is staff training, what's the cost? Why do you need more money for it?
We probably bring in an outside facilitator for that training. I wouldn't say that's something that we would have ready access to a city trainer for.
Okay.
I have 2 questions. Supporting staff like the children's services, I know makes me uncomfortable. I know we've been doing it for a while because we wanted to advocate for the bookmobile. But I think it's time that we start chipping this and putting this back into the regular budget. These are services that we've already been able to substantiate the value for. Even if it meant working with the city on a 5% decrease each year. I think we have this one odd position that's just floating out there and it makes me uncomfortable. I think staff needs to be paid by the city. It's a little bit different with the development office because the function of that office is tied to some of these funds. Right. But direct service provision for children's services, I would strongly believe should not be coming out of the budget any longer. This was to help us get the bookmobile up and running. We've already proven value. That's my first one. I don't know. I don't want to respond.
I agree with that. And there was no timeline sort of created in the beginning when this was rolled out as a solution. But we've sort of had the same thought about starting to ask for sort of a percentage step back every year in the budget cycle. The city has been clear that now is not the time to be asking for new positions, but I think if we present it as this is our step system and we're only going to say X percentage this budget cycle, X percentage next. That seems like it's going to be more likely.
Because we can substantiate value already that the bookmobiles are functioning and serving communities that we weren't able to before.
I agree. It makes me uncomfortable sort of philosophically, but it also just consumes a significant percentage of this budget.
It does, and those are funds that could be going to other things.
Yes, and that would make a huge difference in programming or other direct.
And I think the funders don't know that we're using their funds for staffing in this way, which in terms of transparency, I think we can do better. So I don't know if we want to do this year, but I'd like to see us start working on some. I know if you want to say something.
Oh, no, I was gonna say, I think she was a fly on the wall, like everything you said, Ellsworth and I had talked about putting this together, like.
Very familiar, kind of. Right, no, when we started this, I remember why we did, because we need to get the bookmobile going, but it's 5 years, 6 years. It's time for us to call it.
And every year that cost goes up because the general cost.
And it's, if we don't say something, it's assumed that we can carry this, but those funds need to be going to what they're intended for. The second thing I wanted to bring up is the cost on a board recognition event. Again, those funds could be going somewhere else, and whether we have lower cost ways than spending $1,500 on ourselves to do that. I mean, people have other ideas about this, but to me, raising funds for ourselves,
Tom, do you want to weigh in?
it's uncomfortable.
Yeah, I understand that. I think it's a very hard thing to think about, and I think maybe we could do a recognition event that costs less money. I think do a reception instead of dinner. A big part of the discussion that Carol and Ellsworth and I have had is that the other option for funding this is to ask people to pay for it out of their pockets, and we expect staff to attend, and that seems sort of uncomfortable also to ask them to fund it, and also for some board members it's likely to be a challenge. So I think it's a real conundrum. It's pretty consistent with practices in some other, and I realize this isn't the same thing, but some other nonprofits that I've served on boards, that some of the gift funds are used for celebration events. I don't know. I think it's important to have an event to thank the volunteer trustee who've spent a lot of time and energy on this, and to frankly to have a fellowship event for the board and staff. What the exact nature of the event is, and can we get the cost down? I think there are definitely possibilities there. So yeah, that's sort of how I thought about it.
And I'm not arguing with the idea of it now. I think that's, we historically did that. And we did have people pay for their own meals when they attended. I understand your generosity, and that could be a hardship for some people. But I again look at the source and think these are funds meant for services. And I'm just not sure that's, for me, my priority for the use of those funds.
Yeah.
So just a little bit more context, after conversation with Tom, I did check in with City Legal about whether it was considered a conflict of interest or is there any other issue, and they said that no, technically there would be no problem with it. They did recognize there was an optics issue of potentially some questions about it. Jen and I sort of had a conversation last week thinking about another way to frame it would be to put these resources towards the general volunteer reception. That would make it less of sort of that fellowship aspect, because it would be a much larger event and it wouldn't feel sort of as much of a board and staff event or more of a community event. But that is something that we already allocate resources from the general budget. I think it wouldn't be out of line to include part of that funding through NOBU. But again, it would sort of broaden that audience. I don't know how people would feel about that, if it would make it feel awkward to combine the general volunteer reception with board recognition. But it was another idea that came up.
And again, I'm only speaking for myself, so others may have quite diverse opinions on this.
I think that's fair though. Like what I'm thinking of, what I'm had in mind right when I looked at that $1,500 line item is all the blood, sweat and tears that went into the book sale and how much we got out of that. And gosh, we're doing that to pat ourselves on the back. Yeah, sure. There's a place for that, but something about that doesn't feel right.
I understand those arguments. I do think it is a bit of a conundrum. That we haven't had this event for quite a while and our circumstances have changed, because it used to be, well, the first one I went to, the board president hosted it at his home, which was great. But not everybody, can or wants to do that. And then we had Susan, whose son had a restaurant. And so we could use the room. I know when I talked to Jen at some point, they're calling around and asking for a space, and the spaces themselves are $1,000, $1,500, and that's even without any food at all. So that's, that's part of it, is finding a venue. The other part of it is, I think there have been discussions, especially apparently traditionally, everybody who went would pay their own way, except new board members and retiring board members. And then everybody else would pick up their share of the cost for those people. Well, there's quite a few of those people now, because if we include the people who left 2 years ago. And I'm not really comfortable asking staff to do that. I think it's not. I mean, there may be staff that doesn't care, but there may be staff that, have young families and stuff, and it matters. So it's sort of like everybody acknowledges that an event is a good thing, but we don't quite know how to pull it off.
Well, if we piggybacked on another event that's already in our own facility or did it in a park or someplace that didn't have that overhead, would that still meet the same goals and not have $1,000 room fee?
You still have the food, of course.
Well,
Right.
yeah, but this is true, and maybe there's ways to adjust that too. I'm just thinking, just to jump off what DJ said, the labor that goes into a book sale to treat us all to a reception, just, I don't know, I have some problems with it. I don't have a problem with acknowledging people who found the floor and the people in the front. It's just, I just know where those funds come from.
It does seem appropriate to piggyback it with the volunteers and the big, because we are volunteers as well. It's a different role and a different type of volunteering, but it's the same umbrella.
You do miss the chance to socialize with some of the staff. The volunteer event. I mean,
Oh,
I've been
I guess
to
I
a couple of
haven't
them and
been
they're
to one.
lovely, but they're not really social events.
And that is the piece. I really do see the value in that socialization and that sort of, relationship building, that absent an event like this wouldn't happen.
Right.
So.
And I completely understand the argument that you guys are putting, and I don't
Right.
necessarily disagree with it. It's just like, okay, well, I guess we'll let Tom deal with it.
Thank you, Carol. I mean, what I'm hearing is that nobody, or some people feel pretty uncomfortable with either funding mechanism at this level, at this kind of expense. So I'm hearing two other options. One would be a low expense board only event, board and stuff. And the other is rolling into the volunteer appreciation event, which I appreciate because that doesn't provide the ability to socialize with our, to the fellowship opportunity.
And Tom, there's only two of us that are kind of struggling with it. So we're a minority.
Well, I'm not sure that that's necessarily true.
Yeah, some people haven't spoken. I'm kind of inclined to actually put off a decision if people don't mind, and that input and work with the staff and bring back another proposal. How do people feel about that?
Well, what do we do with the NOVA budget needing action tonight?
You could, it could be,
Or-
and we could hold that, or you could put off approving it till next month. It wouldn't hurt anything to revisit it in a month and approve it at that point.
So you don't need a decision on this tonight on the budget?
I don't think there's anything that yeah, it's been done in other months in the past.
Are there ways to, it says board recognition, but I mean, are there things that are staff recognition events? Like, I think I would feel more comfortable spending money on the staff than I do spending money on us. But I'm happy to celebrate this library staff anytime. So I don't know, maybe it just needs to be slightly repackaged. I don't know.
I will say that another event it could be rolled into would be, we do an in-service day once a year for staff. I don't think it would be inappropriate to include this, immediately before or after lunch or in the evening, sort of as an optional thing, or we're talking about the whole library staff at this point.
Sure. I think you're onto something.
But I think that using NOBU funds for either part of staff and service day or the volunteer recognition event feels comfortable to me. I mean, you get to make the decision, but I think either of those would be not out of line with other years' NOBU requests. And that if that felt more comfortable as far as taking it out of an individual board event and sort of, I'll tell you that $1,500 towards either one of those budgets would be kind of a game changer. I mean, we
I was
really
thinking on-
gotta keep it tight, so.
What we see, it sounds like what people really enjoy about it is their chance to socialize with the staff. And so if those two things could be like a board and staff event, instead of just, it sounds like board recognition event, sounds like we're just all going to a fancy, having a fancy night out on the library. And if it were kind of labeled even as something where it's like a board and staff. Maybe that's just something on paper that, but I haven't attended any of these events, so I guess I don't have like a perfect
Right.
frame of reference, but I'm happy to give the staff money to take a break and enjoy each other's company and get to know them better.
Well, I have attended them and I will say that sitting down at a table with whoever you happen to be sitting with, you learn things about their family or their, it's a positive, well, for me, it's been a positive experience. I won't pretend to speak for the staff, but so that particular fellowship opportunity is good. I don't know that it would be the same if you're talking about the entire staff, it's going to have to be a different event and you can't have, I don't know how many people work here, but it would be different then.
Right.
So it sounds like maybe we just need to.
I think we table and come up with a few options by the time we have our next get together, with the focus being on it being a lower cost in some way, shape, or form. I think that would be a great.
Yeah. So are there a couple of people maybe who would be interested in working on that? Could have one meeting with me.
May as well.
I think I saw
Yeah, that's me.
DJ.
DJ. Okay.
If I'm gonna make
Someone else.
Robin's leaving us.
Yeah.
Position of kind of. That's one more question. Katie, what did, since a lot of these funds are raised by the Friends, what do the Friends do to recognize their own people who have raised these funds when they leave?
What do we do to recognize our board members?
Right, because
Oh.
they're raised by those volunteers. I'm just wondering, what's their expectation?
Well, traditionally, there's a certificate and a thank you card. That's what I've been able to see from the past. And so I actually did send out those cards today. The card to the departing board member. I think stewardship of our board is something that we need to deepen at times.
Good point.
We haven't done this in the past, but we are talking about doing sort of a leadership team. We're saying retreat. What we really mean is to go to another city building and have an all-day meeting. But I do think that, again, if that's another place this funding could be applied and extend that, to a lunch or breakfast that includes maybe more celebratory. And that would be, I think we've been approaching it as sort of a learning fellowship training kind of day, but I don't think it would be hard to, that's another option we could kind of talk about in a small group of like, is that a way that could satisfy a couple of these concerns?
If, Carol, you do want a staff perspective of somebody who has been.
I'd be happy to.
that I've found them very valuable to be able to speak. We're outside of the things that we talk about.
Right. Because you don't talk about library business, you talk about your kids and your dogs and the kind of food you like to eat and stuff. And it's a valuable thing. I don't know if it's $1,500 valuable or not, but I,
I just think that
And
$15 is really not a lot of money.
it isn't a lot of money.
So I'm not sure.
And
We're
if you're
spending a lot of
talking-
energy on very little money.
If you're talking about, well, at one point when I was involved with trying to plan this, we're talking maybe 40 people, and you're not gonna get it down too much
You're right.
less than that, probably. If you supply any kind of food.
I think we have some viable ideas and we can unpack it with
Out there.
a smaller group.
If we get to the point where we're like, you know what? This is a fool's errand. Okay, we'll know that.
so
So
we'll
what
bring
I-
something back next month.
If we could
Did I,
talk-
DJ, was it just DJ that volunteered?
Yeah.
Okay, DJ and I are in charge. I think
Got it.
DJ, you're grilling, I'll crack the beers.
All right, cool.
Maybe that the new people want to be, the problem is you're in transition in June to July.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How could you?
Limited numbers.
Okay, so let's move on to other pieces of
Joseph, I
the,
think, wanted to raise some of
Right.
this.
Yeah, please. So I guess in all of these categories, we can go to personnel, Iowa City Book Festival, et cetera. Are these all priced out somehow? Because I guess the narrative is very vague for me in a lot of these categories. I'm like, how did you derive, 10,000 for this or 20,000 for this, or how do you arrive at those numbers?
Yeah, some of them are very, very sort of, we could itemize them pretty easily and some of them are not. So I'll give an example, like the library programming, $20,000. Probably 18,000 of that are things that we could just go down the list and say, this is the partnership with this agency, this is the Comic-Con, this is the whatever. Others, especially the smaller pots of money, are things that we have a general idea of what the cost will be, but we haven't, for instance, gotten a quote or things like that. The one reason that I think that's been the traditional way to do this budget is it does roll over, so there is not the risk of, if we budgeted 2690 for something and it came in at 24, there's not the pressure of reallocation and loss, et cetera. And it will just continue to build in that budget pot.
What is collection support?
Oh, so that's book purchasing, book and material purchasing.
Well, that's the operating budget to buy books or
Okay.
other types of items for the collection.
All right.
One thing that I did want to mention is the BT Cat cataloging subscription. We would normally spend money like that out of the operating budget, but I'm using this as seed money to compare two different products. So the operating budget is buying our current product next year. And this is to buy this other product, and then it's going to allow us to see if it will fully replace it, and that we want to move forward with it. And then the operating budget will take care of it.
So you can kind of do some feature parity comparison and.
It'd be sort of a 1 year.
Yeah, it's a
1 year.
1 year, it's a small supplement, it's not the full price of that, it's just to allow us to play around and just make a good decision.
I'm excited to see about that.
It's totally different.
It's like data nerd stuff. It's
30 years, it's the present.
my very first library job was in Upper Arlington, Ohio, and we were the second public library to use OCLC. So I had a file. I was a cataloger, which I thought would kill me, but it didn't. I loved it. Anyways, I never like to hear about OCLC. I'm going, "Okay."
I don't think OCLC is going anywhere. I use it. I don't think it's going anywhere.
So where are we? Are we gonna put this off and approve it in July pending the
Yes.
decision about?
And the proposals on.
Is there efficient with new board members coming in?
That's a good point. Would there be an issue with us conditionally approving it here and then doing an planning as a agenda item, an amendment around it?
Also,
Do you reckon?
Oh.
Yeah.
and also if the money rolls over, then we can approve it as is and then hope to get under that budget amount, right? Or, and then hope to use,
The other
I don't
thing
know.
I bring up is when you join a board, this is kind of complex budget.
It is.
And just say to people the first meeting, okay, we want you to approve a budget. Can be challenging, because
Right.
orienting them.
And I like
Just
it.
what NOVU is to begin with.
Right, just
Right.
if you want to find out what we're gonna tell you.
Right.
And I do like the idea, Clary, that you have about not codifying precisely what the recognition would be, but to keep that the costs in mind. And I don't think that would supersede if we approve this as is. And also had Tom and I get together and maybe Dan to talk about how we can keep that reined in. Everybody wins.
to shoot for something. I mean, approve as is so that you're right, new staff doesn't have to start with our own discussion over this, or new
Yeah,
new people wouldn't have to walk in on that. And then also just with the idea in mind that that $1,500 isn't the set in stone. I mean, it's also one of the smallest allotments of,
Also
like
true.
Joseph said,
I think.
one of the
Right,
smallest
it's
dollar
not
amounts on there.
And none of the alternatives that we've been talking about are gonna be free. I mean,
Right.
It's a whole staff of,
Right.
so
Nailed it.
to
Right.
approve the funds, I don't think it locks us into, you know, steak
then
and wine for just the board members. I mean,
And we can really have some discussion about next year's no food budget and what that really looks like.
I mean, are we interpreting that we could pass it and just
Pass this
know what the
on to you.
intention is from your perspective?
Absolutely. I mean, in my opinion, this is a more flexible budget than the operating budget in that it is board controlled.
Mhm.
So at any point, you could call for it to come back to the table. We could come with a different proposal to replace something or to, I think it's a living budget. We do enter it into Munis, which is our budgeting software, and we assign the expenses to budget lines. But it is board controlled and that can be amended if we needed to. So I think that this, to me, at any point, somebody could call this back for more conversation.
well, I think we've already established that these categories are pretty vague. So
Yeah.
it's just one more vague category.
As a side note, we're about the same price as 3 vacuums. About there.
So I think, are we ready to
I would.
take a vote on the Nobu budget? All right, I need a motion to
Move.
approve Nobu budget as presented.
I will second.
Okay, all in favor?
I,
Aye.
All right. So the review the draft of the strategic plan. You did say board action required. So is this the point at which we're actually saying this is the plan?
If it feels satisfactory to folks, this would be the time that you would say, go ahead and implement it. If it doesn't, again, this is a timeline that can be flexible. It felt like in April, when we talked about it, there was some feedback. I feel like we sort of incorporated that along with staff feedback about the draft. Really, the core pieces didn't get a lot of comments. It was more sort of the packaging, and I felt like when I really analyzed all of the feedback, there were sort of two questions, and that was, what does this one really mean, and why didn't you write it this way? So we approached it again and just tried to make it even more accessible, kind of remove that jargon a step farther and write it in a way that could work for as many of our audiences as we could make it work.
I thought you
I-
succeeded.
I do,
Mhm.
I felt the
Yeah.
same way. It was much more succinct and clear and you feel like overall staff is comfortable with where it
do.
is now?
I think that there is, I think that there's a lot of staff concern about the future of the budget. And the future of library services in sort of the politicized environment. But this feels to me like a plan that has room for that work and that will allow us to kind of focus on some of those basic, still rebuilding blocks from the COVID closure, understanding the community's changing needs. And my longer term aspiration would be that this plan will get us to a point that we can think about a capital campaign for expansion if we need to with the next plan. So that's kind of my thinking with it. It does, it doesn't have a capital campaign. It doesn't have a super high reaching sort of pinnacle to it, but it feels like this is the work that needs to happen for the next step. And I also think that we're sort of bringing to the forefront some things that we haven't before with staff well-being and some of those pieces that I think might feel different, but give us the intentionality of being able to say, yes, we will put resources, whatever the larger pool of resources, we're going to take part of that and use it for this to become important. And the experience of having the staff committee work with this plan the whole way through has been amazing. It's been really great work. I think it's helped with all staff buy-in and awareness. So I look forward to, after this is approved, kind of developing maybe 4 staff committees that can each take a goal and really keep that involvement, because I think the ownership kind of lets it come alive. And as I noted in the memo, I think it can be sort of a tunnel to look at it in this format. It works really well as a work plan, but as soon as you start adding the tactics, I think it's natural for a lot of people to sort of focus there, and the bigger picture is harder to see. That's why we included that draft of sort of a higher level document that brought those pieces out and didn't include all of the other information, but hoping to kind of give you both views.
And just procedurally, we are mandated to review this, not just now, but every year from now on, isn't that right?
Yes, and we've traditionally done at least every 6-month updates to the plan. We've tried a few different, like, is quarterly better, is 6 months better? So there are regular updates to it.
Most recently, I think we've done quarterly, which I think works kind of well. Okay, any more comments, or are we ready to approve the plan?
I move for its approval.
We Need a second, okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Ellsworth, you are up next.
This is the time of year that feels like super busy, and then when you sit down to write a report for the month, it's sort of like, what are we doing? Summer review, like all the big people, the work all kind of comes together for implementation, and so I feel like it's sort of a light one, but summer reading is going great. Staff are engaged, happy, public seems happy. You know, Angie will have all those numbers, but just sort of a recognition that staff are really working hard this time of year, and the numbers are edging right back up to those pre-pandemic numbers. So children's programs with hundreds of folks, and that's exciting to see. Victoria, our teen librarian, has really rolled out a pretty comprehensive plan that's really easy for teams to follow, with sort of this kind of activities on Mondays, on Tuesdays, on Wednesdays. So it's fun to see that group developing. Yeah, otherwise, happy to answer any questions. Oh, and there is a change. Robin and I met with Robin Sullivan, the Board of Supervisors, to kind of talk through some of the strategic initiatives that are coming up for the library, some of the funding challenges we might be facing, just kind of an update, since they hadn't needed to appoint any trustees for the county seat for 2 terms. And the conversation I thought was really positive. Robin was there too. So we talked through those things. We kind of got an idea of timeline. Then when I checked in with the county to verify what packet should we be watching to see the applications come out, they let me know that they had not received any applications. And that they were sort of saying, well, we haven't heard from Robin if she'd like to continue, which I thought.
18 years,
that
Robin.
feels like The universe is speaking.
It's a Methuselah
Um,
of
So I reached out to Robin and just sort of said, hey, this is the update. Do you have any feeling about what we should do next? And we had a good conversation about sort of the whole situation, and it sounds like there's willingness to continue. So we both confirmed that's we support that application for another term, and the supervisor will vote on that. Was it July 6th?
Yeah, I don't think it's a done situation,
No,
because there's no application. Like,
yes.
It's
So
kind of an unusual situation, so,
they will
maybe,
consider.
you know, where they do, right, it's
At their July.
back on their table.
And then my understanding is if for some reason that decision wasn't made, I believe the process would be the position will be open for an additional 30 days. And I think it's a great plot twist. I mean, I think that we would never, expect somebody to stay on after 2 full terms, but the knowledge base that gives is pretty amazing, especially thinking about some of the potential upcoming challenges. So I feel like the continuity would be a really positive thing for the board and for the library. And our conversation with Rod, I felt like was very positive. I thought he was very interested. I mean, it felt good. It felt like a good exchange, kind of focusing on library values, but the importance of diversity in thought and all of those pieces that we talk about all the time. So we will wait and see, and by the early part of July, we should know what that looks like.
And I know, I'm just gonna put up a comment. I got the sense the board of supervisors, if they're behind what Rod was saying, are very supportive of the challenges that are in front of us. That they understand some of the dissent that's occurred against public libraries and some of the significant funding challenges that are ahead of us and how that will possibly affect services. And I got the feeling they're standing behind us. So just to acknowledge them.
But it still stands that we know that tonight is Carol's final meeting.
I feel like such a slacker. My goodness, why would you do 18 years?
But I don't think it's a done deal, so I think it's like kind of
Oh, that's a good deal.
2.5 of me and.
We can save the emotional accolades for the event that's gonna happen. But really significant things. It's a big task, and it's been really great.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
And we look forward to next month when you're here to make public comment.
Out on the West Coast next month. Okay. Let's see, children's report. It sounds like you've been plenty busy. I didn't want to add anything,
Say the least.
Angie?
We are up to 1,044 signups for the kids, and teen and adults have 737 signed up, so yeah. Moving along.
Can you give us a reference point, like compared to most years? Or
It's a little bit lower
No.
than pre-pandemic, then. So.
Okay. The numbers are
A little bit higher, well, actually, no, I take that back, compared to last year, but, the kids were in school till June 6th, and when I ran the numbers, we were actually about, it was about 400 short. When I was writing this report, we were 400 short the year report, but we also started it.
It could just be a laugh.
Yeah, and we usually wait until the kids are out of school,
Yeah.
and this year we started while kids were in school, so. I think it's for big majority of it. Plus, this is a new year too, that we have been putting a lot of the reading longs just at the self-checkouts for people to grab and go. So they're not actually stopping and signing up with us first. So as those come, hopefully come
Right.
back,
They'll
we'll get
sign up
them
when
in
they
then.
submit. Yeah.
So,
We might see less signups, but our completion percentage might be higher.
and we'll sign them up because we gotta put them in the record.
Oh,
So they'll get
okay.
signed up when they're bringing back their completed forms. So it might be a lot of people signing up and completing on the same day.
Is it helpful to you to have the same date just be June 1st every year? At my other library, boy, that was a game changer
Yeah.
for the staff.
It
'Cause the
is.
stress level and
It's kind of
And,
what we've been moving to, is just to have it, it's just a nice.
it's really
clean
saves
day,
your,
like, we're starting this day and
it saves your individual conversations with every single parent about what day you start. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it may change the way your signups are looking, but I think overall for your staff, it might be really nice.
And please, when you walk out of the building, you won't see them, but when you do turn around and look at the doors, you saw them, some
Squeal a little. It was
gorgeous stickers on them, their window cling. So you can actually see out of them, so it doesn't look like you're looking at anything, but when you look into the building, you can see the beautiful logo that the graphics team designed. And Ellsworth's been going along with my idea. Every time I walk into his office, I'm like, come walk with me, I want to buy something.
Brilliant.
So I'm glad they look fantastic. I think, again, too, we did put specific dates on those because they can be used, and as we kind of move to just a Iowa City reads type theme.
Just texted him, said his internet connection is not holding up.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, Angie. Now, collection services, town budget is on your mind these days.
I wanted to also just reiterate that Melody and Alyssa will be presenting at Haley, which is such a big deal.
It is a big deal.
And some of that's actually tied to the audiobook. We're removing the audiobooks because we know that this is going to impact people. And so what are ways that we can help them? And one of them is investigating options on people's phones for people to be able to use the audiobook options better. But yeah, we are going to start phasing out our audiobook disc collections. We're going to give it a good long phase out for, especially for the adult collection. So it'll be about 1.5 years so that we can work with the public, let them know, get them on Libby, get them on Hoopla, make sure that they're comfortable. The library, work with the services for the blind through the state too as well, and make sure that we have access to that. So, but the YA and the children's ones are going to go first because they're not being used. We had last year, I think 7 patrons check out an audiobook from the young adult section. Teens don't know what CDs are.
They do know what Libby is, so
Right.
yeah.
And they weren't teens who checked them out. There is no one that we know the demographics of people in the collection. Every class, so we think it's time to do. I'm happy to answer any questions.
One thing I wanted to call out was the Chromebooks and hotspots going away. Yes, obviously, everyone's disappointed by that because the intent behind that was to increase internet access to our patrons. It didn't work, and that's okay. And I just want to say thank you for the explanation, and I'm sorry it didn't work out.
I know, it was very, it's disheartening to like throw a whole bunch of Chromebooks back into the mix and hotspots, and then, 3 months later, it was like, we don't have any more, and we tried to call everybody, and we can't get a hold of them. And
Yeah.
one was at a pawn shop, the others are broken. It wasn't just the replacement parts, there was a staff person who has to call everybody, who has to send out those bills, who has to work with the police, like, it is very time intensive. And it was 12 items. And if it takes up the majority of your time, yeah, 1.2 million things go out of this building every year, and those are the ones that are causing these issues. I will say, we were at a city meeting yesterday that they were talking about the Better Together 2030 campaign. Community broadband is on there, so I really do feel that internet access is a community issue. The library offering hotspots for a week is not providing internet access to somebody.
Right.
It's a bigger problem than what we provide, and we provided it.
But in advocating for that access,
We're gonna.
can we stay in that conversation?
Yes.
Of community solutions, because I think this really is access information.
Yeah, I agree.
I think the goal of it, when you say it didn't work how we did it, but the goal of it was the value.
The intent was, yeah.
Why would we try to do it, why to work, and then we need a larger solution.
It's a little bit off, but are they tracking it all? But I can think of high school students, they don't have access to internet at home, but is the city tracking it all where
Students
the?
enrolled in the Iowa City schools do have hotspots.
Most of them do.
Iowa City schools provide hotspots for
So
students.
it's being met in another.
So
For them.
not adults, so not, I mean, but if every family who does not have adequate internet access can get a hotspot if their kid is enrolled in either Iowa City Community Schools or the homeschool assistance program partnered with Iowa City
I think
Schools.
that's
So
great.
so as students, so children, because the school district provides the device and expects them to be able to use the device, they also have a responsibility to make sure that they
Much
can
better
use the device. I mean, that's not a perfect solution. There is exactly the same problems at the Iowa City schools. They devote a ton of staff time to this.
But someone's addressing.
But there is, so high school students do have a way, and their families therefore can also use that hotspot in the same way. So it's an outlier group.
Okay, that makes.
So,
me much more
so,
comfortable.
yeah, it's not school kids. I mean, I'm sure that there's a whole lot of other
Right, but there's
ways.
a way for it to be
But
addressed.
it would be working with those community partners that also work with, those marginalized, got access. I don't know how to say that right, but like the groups that need access to all kinds of things are also. So like that would be a stronger way to spend your time, is to have that kind of advocacy group, because I also deal with broken Chromebooks every day of my life. And so there is a whole lot of time and resources devoted to it. And so at least like we can guarantee that, it's not affecting children's schooling in any way. That's not,
Thank you.
yeah.
Okay, thank you, Anne. And anybody have comments about Brent's or questions about Brent's report? No?
Have you had any feedback about that hearing loop? Has anyone used, you haven't heard anything?
Andrew got some feedback about it from a children's program. I don't remember exactly what it was, but it was positive feedback. About it.
Excellent. I was just wondering, I
Such a
mean,
cool thing. Yeah.
I just think that's such neat technology.
And I actually neglected to put this in my report, but the Optimist Club of Iowa City actually sending us about $1,200 in support of the installation of that. system. So
Excellent.
they were excited to hear about it, and I've been talking about the hearing loop with folks as I move around advocating for the library, and people are really excited about this addition.
Excellent.
Okay, did you have anything else you want to add to your report?
No, I think I can tell you that the numbers for the book sale landed a little over $3,000. So yeah, we had 90 boxes of books and moved about 65.
Hey, I'm excited.
Yeah.
Okay. President's report, I don't really have much of a report except to say, well, I thought Robin was leaving, but whether she leaves or not, I think that she's been for me, a good partner because we started this term together and she's been a great mentor and you all are fortunate if she is able or plans to continue on. I will also, for me, the 6 years has been really a positive experience. I think I especially appreciate the board right now because everybody is respectful. The conversations are respectful. They're not, everybody reads the packet and I contacted Ellsworth after the last meeting because I thought the last meeting was especially good because especially you and Joseph raised questions and it was for me, such a tremendous opportunity to learn, Ellsworth's perspective and what the staff does. And I just thought it was a really good conversation. And I appreciate this group for that they're able to do that. I was part of the search committee, as was Robin, and I think that was and so were Jason and Ann, which was my opportunity to get to know them better. It was a very interesting experience. I think, I think the transition from a legacy director to a new director was harder than people necessarily anticipated, harder for the staff, harder for the new director. But I think overall in the last how long have you been here? 4 years? To me, compared to the first 2 years I was on the board, it's been an opportunity for the board to be more involved, more engaged. And so I think it's been a positive thing. And I think the library is going to survive just fine. Yeah, we got through COVID. We did get through COVID. And then the staff, I just can't, I wouldn't have known if I'd never been on the board, I never would have really appreciated the level of staff that we have, especially the leadership team. I mean, they really are amazing. I worked for like 30 years in libraries, and a lot of that was as a leader. And boy, I would have been so happy to have this staff instead of some of the staff that did it. And I worked in a lot of libraries, public libraries, academic libraries, special libraries. And you guys, you really are tremendous. And I've learned so much from your reports. So for me, it's been a really good 6 years. However, I am not crazy and I'm not going to do another 6 years because I would be really old by then. I think Robin's younger than I am. So that's my excuse for not continuing that. But anyway, I appreciate you.
Term should end before I retire, the next term. I was thinking of making this just.
Announcements from members.
I just want to say thank you, Karen.
Oh, well, you're welcome. It's been, I did not plan to be president. But it's been a good, it really is. I really have no negative things to say about the experience, especially the last couple of years have been really, really good. I was getting a bit of a complex because we kept losing board members, but hopefully now it's a stable group. Anyway.
In all meetings of the word.
Committee reports
The Friends Foundation did get together we had our meeting and we talked about our, let's see, I always mix the words up. I'm sorry. Strategic plan and our mission and objective. And we've got something together. I don't think we're quite ready to share because we're going to look at it internally a little bit to make sure that we get it judged up, so to speak. But I'll report.
Okay. And I think, so that takes us to the consent agenda. People, I need a motion to approve the consent agenda, or I need discussion about amending the minutes.
I can make a motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
You second every motion.
Get my name on paper, whatever.
Good support.
Yeah.
Okay, and then the next thing is the agenda for the July meeting. Since we went ahead and did the Nobu budget, I don't think we have any carryover things. The strategic plan review, we're done with now, right?
That will be the old plan, the plan that's. and
Oh,
so
the
that'll be sort of
review,
a wrap
okay,
up of that.
okay. Okay, in that case, I think we will,
I'm sorry, I forgot to mention this during the report. I just wanted to say that we had the drag story time at the pool event and it went great. It felt finally like a children's program, just everybody was relaxed. There was no adult conflict. They cordoned off an area of the lawn inside the pool fence for families and children. There was a police officer that was there at our request. I got 2 positive comments afterwards from people just kind of saying like, it was nice to have him there, kind of in case anything happened, but just felt like a children's event, which is what it's intended to be. So I think everybody was relieved. No. No, and there was the story time was part of a larger part of the pool. And then there was also in that park, like a cookout kind of an event, like there were multiple pride things happening sort of in one little area. And I didn't see any countermeasures at all.
Nice.
So I'm sorry, I forgot to give that update, but thanks for letting me.
Yeah.
okay. Now we will adjourn. And Clara.